I got in early the next morning. 8:20 a.m. The office was mostly empty, just a few people at their desks, the low hum of computers starting up, the usual quiet before things picked up. His message from the night before was still sitting in my inbox. Can we review this together tomorrow morning? No time specified, but I knew he would come looking for me as soon as he got in. I opened my laptop and pulled up the files I had been working on. Not the original document, the full version, but the fragmented pieces I had been sending him. The ones that showed parts of the idea without connecting them completely. At 8:47, I saw him walk in. He didn't go to his office first. He came straight toward my desk. "Morning," he said. "Morning. Do you have a few minutes now?" he asked. "Sure." We didn't go to a conference room. Instead, he pulled a chair from the empty desk next to mine and sat down, angling his laptop so we could both see. "Let's walk through what you sent," he said. I nodded. He opened the file I had shared the day before. The partial breakdown. He scrolled slowly, stopping at each section, reading more carefully than he had earlier in the week. "That part," he said, pointing at a section on system load variability. "Can you explain how this affects the timeline?" I leaned slightly closer, looking at the screen. "It depends on volume," I said. "If intake spikes beyond a certain point, the automation layer can slow things down instead of speeding them up." He frowned. "But we're assuming steady volume, right?" "Not necessarily," I said. "Historically, it fluctuates." He nodded slowly, like he was trying to fit that into the version of the plan he had already built. "Okay," he said. "So how do we account for that?" There was a small pause. "You model different scenarios," I said. "Best case, average, worst case." He clicked his pen against the table once, then again. "Do we have that?" he asked. I looked at him. "Not fully," I said. That was technically true, not in the version he had. He nodded again, then scrolled further. "What about integration?" he asked. They kept asking about that yesterday. I could tell from the way he said it that this was one of the areas that had come up repeatedly. "It depends on how much of the current system you're trying to automate," I said. "All of it, ideally," he replied. "That's where the risk is," I said. He glanced at me, then back at the screen. "Why?" Because the current system wasn't built for partial automation," I said. "You either leave certain steps manual, or you rebuild parts of it." He leaned back slightly in the chair. "That didn't come up before," he said. I didn't respond to that. Instead, I just looked at the screen. He sat there for a second, then nodded, like he was moving past it. "Okay," he said. "So we need to factor that in." He kept scrolling. Each section brought up another question. Each question led to another gap. Not huge ones, not obvious enough to collapse everything immediately, but enough to slow him down. By 9:15, the conversation had shifted. He wasn't just reviewing anymore. He was asking, more directly now. "What would you change in the timeline? What's the biggest risk if we move too fast? Which parts can we actually implement first?" Now, I answered each one the same way I had been answering all week. Carefully. Accurately. But without handing him the full structure. Around 9:30, he stopped scrolling. "This is more complex than it looked," he said. It wasn't a question. "No," I said. He exhaled quietly, then closed the laptop halfway, like he needed a break from looking at it. "We need to present an updated plan by Monday," he said. "They want something solid." I nodded. "Can you help build that?" he asked. There it was. Not a small request this time. Not a fragment. The whole thing. I didn't answer right away. He watched me, waiting. "I can work on it," I said finally. "Good," he said quickly. "Let's align on the approach first." Align. That word again. We spent the next 20 minutes going back and forth on structure. He suggested keeping the 15% projection, and I suggested adding a range. He hesitated, then said, "We'll see." He wanted to keep the 2-week pilot. I pointed out the dependencies. He adjusted it slightly. 3 weeks, still tight, still optimistic, but not as unrealistic as before. It was the first time I saw him actually shift something based on what I said, not because he wanted to, because he had to. By 10 o'clock, people were starting to gather for another meeting nearby. The office was filling up, the quiet from earlier gone. He stood up, picking up his laptop. "Send me whatever you have by end of day," he said. "We'll refine it over the weekend if needed." I nodded. "Okay." He paused for a second, like he was about to say something else. Then he didn't. He just walked back to his office. I sat there for a while after he left, looking at my screen, thinking, because at that point everything had shifted again. The project was no longer clean, no longer simple. And he knew it. But instead of stopping, instead of stepping back and reassessing, he was trying to rebuild it under pressure, using whatever pieces he could get, including me. Around noon, another email came through, this time from one of the senior managers who had been in the meeting. Subject: Follow up on onboarding proposal. It was addressed to ChinaDo, but I was CEC'd. That was new. They outlined a list of specific concerns: system limitations, data reliability, client impact during transition. Each point was direct, clear, no room for interpretation. And at the end, please provide a revised plan addressing these points before proceeding further. I read it once, then closed it. That was the external consequence. The part that moved beyond internal conversations. Now it was documented, official, and harder to manage. By late afternoon, the pressure was visible. ChinaDo stayed in his office most of the day, door partially closed. People went in and out, short conversations, quick updates. At 4:40, he sent another message. "Any updates?" I looked at the clock, then at my screen. I had been working, but not in the way he expected. I had rebuilt the full structure, every section, every dependency, every risk, exactly the way it should have been from the start. Clear, complete, accurate. I saved the file. Then I sat there for a long time, looking at it. Because this was the point where everything came together. What I had built, what he had taken, what he was now trying to fix, and what would happen depending on what I did next. At 5:05, I replied, "Oh, still working on it. We'll send tomorrow." He responded almost immediately. "Okay. Need it." I closed my email and shut down my laptop, left the office without saying much to anyone. Because by then, it wasn't about whether the idea would work, it was about who it would belong to when it did, and whether I was going to let that stay the same. I didn't send the file that night, or the next morning. I woke up early on Saturday around 7:10, out of habit more than anything else. My phone was quiet, no new messages from him, no follow-ups. But I knew they would come. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. The document was exactly where I had left it. Complete, structured, everything in place the way it should have been from the beginning. If someone picked it up fresh, without context, it would make sense. It would hold up under questions. It would survive the kind of scrutiny that had exposed the gaps in his version. I scrolled through it slowly, not checking for mistakes, just looking at it differently now. Because for the first time, I wasn't thinking about how to improve it. I was thinking about what it meant to hand it over. At 8:02, my phone buzzed. A message from him. "Morning. Any chance you can send what you have soon? Want a review before Monday?" I didn't open it right away. I already knew what it said. Instead, I closed my laptop and sat there for a while, letting the room stay quiet. All week, I had been reacting, adjusting, holding things back in small, controlled ways. But this was different. This was a decision point, not about the work itself, about what I was willing to accept. Around 9 o'clock, I opened the laptop again. This time, I didn't go straight to the document. I opened my email, scrolled back to Tuesday night, found the message I had sent him. Initial concept. Still in draft form. His reply. Got it. We'll take a look. That was the only written acknowledgement that connected me to the idea before it became his. I clicked on the attachment in that thread. Just the original version. Less polished than what I had now, but still clearly mine. The structure, the language, the core thinking. It was all there. I sat there looking at both versions. The original and the final. Two versions of the same idea, separated by everything that had happened this week. At 9:18, another message came in. Need to finalize approach today. Let me know. Shorter this time. More direct. I leaned back in my chair. For most of the week, I had been focused on him. What he was doing, what he understood, what he didn't. Now, for the first time, I shifted that focus completely. To myself. To what I had allowed. Because none of this had happened in a vacuum. He had taken the idea. But I had watched it happen. I had stayed quiet in the meeting. I had answered his questions without correcting him. And I had let him build something incomplete, knowing where it would break. That wasn't accidental. That was a choice. Not a single decision, but a series of them. And now, this, sitting at my kitchen table with a finished version of the work, was just the last one. I opened a new email, added his name in the to field, then stopped. Not because I didn't know what to write, but because I did. There were a few different ways I could go. I could send the completed document, no context, let him take it and present it as his again, this time successfully. I could send it with a note, something subtle, something that reinserted my name into the process without directly calling him out. Or I could do something else entirely. Something that didn't rely on him at all. I minimized the email and opened the company directory. Had scrolled through until I found the name of the senior manager who had sent the follow-up email the day before, the one who had CC'd me. I clicked on their profile, hovered over the email address, then stopped. My phone buzzed again, this time a call. Chinedu. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. Hey, I said. Hey, he replied quickly. Just checking in. Did you get my messages? Yeah, I said. Okay, good, he said. I really need that document today. They're expecting something solid by Monday, and I don't want to go in unprepared again. Again. That word stayed there for a second. I understand, I said. So you can send it in the next hour or so? He asked. There was pressure in his voice now. Not aggressive, but present. I'm still refining it, I said. A small pause. What's left? He asked. Detailing the scenarios, I said, making sure everything lines up. Okay, he said. Just don't overcomplicate it. We need something clear and strong. Clear and strong. I almost said something then. Something simple. Like it was already clear. It was already strong. Before. But I didn't. Got it, I said. All right, he replied. Send it as soon as you can. The call ended. I set my phone down and looked back at my laptop, at the two open windows, the finished document, the blank email. For a long time, I had been thinking about the situation in terms of fairness. Who deserved credit? What was right? What wasn't? But sitting there, in that quiet space, none of that felt as important as it had earlier in the week. What mattered was control. Not over him, over what happened next. I reopened the email. This time I didn't hesitate. I attached a file, but not the final version. The original one, the one from Tuesday night. Then I started typing. Not a long message, just enough. Hi. Sharing the initial draft I mentioned earlier this week for reference as you refine the proposal. Let me know if you'd like to walk through the full structure and underlying assumptions. Best? I read it once. It was neutral, professional, but it did something important. It re-established the timeline, put the origin back into writing, without accusing, without escalating. I hovered over the send button for a second, then clicked it. The email went through at 10:02 a.m. I sat back in my chair and exhaled slowly. That wasn't the final move, but it was the first one that wasn't just reactive. The first one that shifted something back in my direction. At 10:07, his reply came in. Thanks. Yeah, reviewing now. Nothing else. No acknowledgement of what it was, no comment on when it was created, just a response. I closed the laptop halfway and sat there, staring at the edge of the table. Because I knew what would happen next. He would read it, compare it to what he had been working with, and for the first time, he would have to confront the gap between what he had taken and what he never really had. He didn't respond again that morning. No follow-up questions, no calls, nothing to suggest how he was reacting to what I had sent. That silence felt different from the rest of the week. Before, when he went quiet, it usually meant he was moving fast, jumping to the next step. This felt slower, deliberate. I didn't check my email again until early afternoon. There was nothing new from him. Instead, there was a meeting invite. Subject: onboarding proposal, revision review. Scheduled for Monday at 11 a.m. Attendees included the same senior manager who had sent the follow-up email, 2 department heads, and Chinedu. My name was on it. I read it twice just to be sure. This was the first time I had been formally included in anything related to the project since the beginning. No explanation in the invite, no note attached, just a calendar slot. I accepted it without thinking too much about it. Then I closed my laptop and stepped away for a while. The rest of Saturday passed quietly. I didn't go back to the document. I didn't try to refine anything further. For the first time all week, I let the work sit exactly as it was. Sunday was the same. A couple of times I thought about opening my email, checking if anything had changed, but I didn't. Whatever was happening on his side, I would see it soon enough. By Monday morning, the office felt almost normal again. People were back at their desks, talking about weekend plans, catching up on things that had nothing to do with work. If you didn't know what had been building underneath, you wouldn't notice anything unusual. I got in at 8:50 and sat down, turning on my computer, going through the usual routine. Yes, at 9:15, I saw him walk in. He looked tired. Not dramatically, not in a way that would draw attention, but enough that it was noticeable if you had been watching him all week. He went straight to his office. Didn't stop by my desk. Didn't say anything. That told me more than any message could have. Around 10:30, I got an email from him. Subject: onboarding proposal. Let's review together before the meeting, he wrote. 10:45 in the small conference room. Short, direct. I grabbed my laptop and went. He was already there when I walked in, sitting at the table, his laptop open, a printed copy of the document in front of him. Not the summary, the original, the one I had sent on Saturday. He didn't look up right away when I entered. He was reading, pen in hand, marking something on the page. I sat down across from him. Yet a few seconds passed before he spoke. "This is what you sent me on Tuesday," he said. Not a question. "Yes," I said. He nodded slowly, still looking at the paper. "And this," he said, tapping another set of pages next to it, "is what we've been working with." I could see the difference immediately. His version. Compressed. Clean. Missing pieces. He leaned back slightly in his chair and finally looked at me. "You didn't mention this earlier," he said. I held his gaze. "I sent it to you," I said. Another pause. Not long. But enough. He looked back down at the document, flipping a page. "There's a lot more detail here," he said. "Yes. Why didn't you include this when I asked for the breakdowns?" he asked. His tone wasn't angry. It was controlled. Careful. "I answered what you asked for," I said. That sat there between us. And he didn't respond immediately. Instead, he closed the document halfway and rested his hands on top of it. "They're expecting a full revision today," he said. "Something that addresses all the concerns from last week." "I know," I said. "And this," he gestured toward the original document, "this does that. It's a starting point," I said. He watched me for a second, like he was trying to decide how direct to be. "You could have made this easier," he said. There it was. Not an accusation, not fully, but close enough. I didn't answer right away, because he was right, in a way. I could have. I could have handed him everything from the beginning, filled in the gaps before they showed, made sure the presentation held up, but I hadn't. "I wanted to see how it would be used," I said. Yet that was the first time I had said anything like that out loud. He didn't react immediately, just looked at me, then down at the paper again. After a few seconds, he nodded once. Not agreement. Acknowledgement. "All right," he said. He opened his laptop again and turned it slightly so we could both see. "Let's rebuild it properly," he said. "No ownership language, no my proposal, just the work." We spent the next 40 minutes going through the document line by line. This time, it was different. He asked questions when he didn't understand something. He didn't skip sections, didn't try to simplify things that needed to stay complex. At one point, he stopped and said, "This part. This is where they pushed back the most." "I know," I said. He glanced at me, then continued. By the time we finished, the structure had shifted. Not completely. No, but enough. The projections were now a range. The timeline had been extended. The risk section was back, fully outlined. It wasn't as clean as the version he had presented before. But it was real. At 10:58, he closed his laptop. "Let's go," he said. We walked to the boardroom together. Same room as Friday. Same table. Same people. But this time, when we walked in, he didn't go straight to the head of the table. He paused slightly, then said, "We've revised the proposal based on your feedback." We. It was a small word, but it changed the shape of the room. I took a seat along the side, opening my laptop, not saying anything yet. He started the presentation again. Same structure. But this time, when questions came, he didn't rush to answer. He paused, looked at me once or twice, not for permission, for confirmation. And when the detailed questions came, the ones that had stopped him before, he didn't try to move past them. He addressed them, carefully, fully. At one point, the senior manager turned toward me. "Can you walk us through the integration risks?" they asked. I nodded. "Sure," I said. And for the first time since this started, I spoke in that room, not correcting anything, not reclaiming anything directly, just explaining the work the way it was meant to be understood. The room felt different this time, not easier, but clearer. By the end of the meeting, there was no immediate approval, but there was something else. "Put together a phased rollout plan," the director said. "Start small. Validate assumptions before scaling." Chenadu nodded. "We can do that," he said. We, again. The meeting ended shortly after. As people started to leave, Mao, the senior manager who had sent the email on Friday, stopped by the table. "Good improvement," they said. "This version makes more sense." Chenadu nodded. "Thank you." Then they looked at me. "Glad you were included this time," they said. "Me too," I replied. They gave a small nod and walked out. Chenadu didn't say anything right away. He just gathered his things, slower than usual. Then he looked at me. "We'll need to keep working on this," he said. "I know," I said. There was a pause. Then he nodded once and left the room. I stayed for a second longer, closing my laptop, looking at the empty chairs. Because at that point, the decision had already been made. Not by him. By me. about how this was going to go from here on. After that meeting, things didn't snap back into place. There wasn't a clean reset where everything suddenly felt fair or balanced. It was quieter than that, more gradual. The project moved forward, but differently. The phased rollout plan took most of the week to put together. This time, I was included in every discussion, not just copied on emails, but actually in the room, part of the decisions, expected to speak. No one made a formal announcement about it. It just shifted. Chinedu didn't try to take full control again. He still led the meetings, still set the direction when it came to timelines and expectations, but he didn't present the work as something he had built alone. Not anymore. The language changed first. It's instead of my proposal or even the onboarding initiative, he started saying the plan we're developing or the model we've been working on. Small adjustments, but consistent and noticeable. In the first few meetings after Monday, he deferred more. Not in an obvious way, not like he was stepping back completely, but enough that when detailed questions came up, he didn't rush to answer them himself. He let them land. Then looked toward me. At first, it felt strange. A week earlier, I had been completely invisible in those same conversations. Now I was being pulled into them without explanation. No one questioned it. From the outside, it probably looked like I had been part of it all along. That part stayed unresolved. There was no moment where he said, "This started with her," or anything close to it. There's no acknowledgement in front of the team, no correction of the earlier narrative, just a shift in how things were handled going forward. For a few days, I kept waiting for something more direct, a conversation, an explanation, even just a brief comment when no one else was around. It didn't come. Instead, what I got was behavior. On Wednesday afternoon, we were reviewing one of the rollout phases, going over client segments and how to test the new process without disrupting everything at once. There was a disagreement about where to start. He suggested beginning with mid-level accounts, less risk, easier to manage. I disagreed. High-volume accounts will give better data, I said. If the system holds there, it'll hold anywhere. He paused. A week ago, he would have pushed back, framed it differently, as moved the conversation in his direction. This time, he nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "Let's test that assumption. No argument, no need to win the point. Just a shift." That was the first time I saw it clearly. Not guilt, not exactly, but awareness. By the end of that week, the plan was finalized enough to move into the first phase of testing. Nothing dramatic, no big announcement, just a small group of clients, carefully selected, running through the adjusted onboarding process. We monitored everything closely. Timing, error rates, points where the system slowed down or needed manual intervention. It wasn't perfect. Some parts worked better than expected, others didn't. But the structure held. The version we had rebuilt, the one with all the details, the risks, the flexibility, that was what made the difference. That's not the simplified version from the beginning. That one wouldn't have survived this stage. One afternoon, about 2 weeks into testing, I was at my desk reviewing a set of reports when Chinedu walked over. He didn't have his laptop with him this time, just a printed page. "Quick look?" he asked. I nodded. He handed it to me. It was a summary of the pilot results so far. Clean, but not oversimplified. Accurate. I scanned it quickly. "This section," I said, pointing to a paragraph about system load, "you might want to adjust the wording. It makes it sound more stable than it actually is." He leaned slightly closer, reading it again. "Okay," he said. "How would you phrase it?" I told him. He nodded, took the paper back, and made a note. "Thanks," he said. Then he started to walk away. He stopped after a couple of steps. Vesh turned back slightly. "I should have handled that differently," he said. It was quiet. No one else around us was paying attention. I looked at him. He didn't elaborate, didn't specify what that meant. But he didn't need to. "I know," I said. Another pause. Then he nodded once and walked off. That was it. No long conversation. No apology that covered every detail. Just a single sentence. But it was enough to confirm what had already been clear. He knew. And more importantly, he had adjusted. Not perfectly. Not in a way that erased what happened, but in a way that changed how things would work going forward. By the end of the month, the onboarding process had improved. Not dramatically, not in a way that would make headlines inside the company, but enough that people noticed. Fewer delays, smoother transitions between steps, less confusion on the client side. The numbers reflected it, not 15%, closer to 10. Right in the range I had originally expected. And no one celebrated it as a breakthrough. It just became the new normal. Another system that worked a little better than the one before it. And the project itself? It stayed shared. Not officially labeled that way, but in practice. When people referenced it, they mentioned both of us. Sometimes him first, sometimes me. It depended on who was speaking. I didn't correct it. I didn't push for anything more. Because by that point, the outcome mattered more than the recognition I didn't get at the start. Not in a moral sense, just in a practical one. I had control over the work again, over how it was built, how it was used. And that changed everything. The original moment, the meeting where he presented my idea like it was his, didn't disappear. It stayed where it was. A clear line between how things had been and how they shifted after. As I still remembered the exact details, the folder, the wording, the way he avoided looking at me. But it stopped feeling like something I needed to resolve, because I had already made the only decision that mattered, not about him, about myself, about what I would do when it happened, and what I wouldn't do again.